listeners, welcome to my podcast by LB Music. I'm Lily, I'm here with award-winning Neon. Welcome, Neon.
Hello! So, nice to meet you too, Lily. I assume you want to know a bit about what I do in regards to events and things.
Tell us a little bit about your role in Stroud Drag Collective.
So, that's a pretty big question unto itself, but basically I head up the Stroud Drag Collective, and I put on loads and loads of events across Gloucestershire, so Stroud, Cheltenham, Gloucester, less Cheltenham because, it's a long way to drive and things like that, because obviously I live in... But I do loads of events, but I also have headed up lots of different Pride events as well. So, like Stroud and Dursley, which see quite a lot of people come and to these events, so when I'm not actually doing my day job, instead I'm planning events, so basically I get no sleep.
So just to clarify for our listeners, you oversee the setting up of live events and you also perform in them.
Yep, that is exactly right, yep.
So how long does it take to set up these events? Can it be organised in just a couple of weeks, or do you need to be planning them months in advance?
Well, that does differ based on the event, but if I could set up an event in a couple of weeks, I would be really, really stressed up to my eyeballs. So I usually give myself about 3 months to plan an event. That's the minimum time frame that I will do an event. But put it this way, most of my events this year are pretty much already planned, because I really, really do like to be kind of ahead of things, and it also takes a lot of time to organise the venue, ticket sales, advertising, pushing the event, finding engineers, lighting, sound. It's a lot of things go into events which people don't realise.
So do you get a better turnout for paid for events with ticket sales or with free events?
So most people probably would be expecting me to say free events, but actually it's paid events which gets a better turnout, because people, when they pay for something, they actually feel like, oh, I spent money on it, I should go. Whereas a free event, when people don't have money behind an event, they just don't turn up. And it gets quite difficult to kind of plan how many people are coming up to an event, if you don't have ticket sales to keep an eye on numbers.
So for your events, where and how do you advertise?
Well, that also depends on the events, but usually we have a plan on how we advertise, and that includes, Facebook and Instagram are great for it. TikTok, as much as I hate making TikToks, they're also good for it as well. But also posters and word of mouth are pretty good. We actually have a mailing list, so when a new event gets announced, part of the automatic process is an email goes out to those people who have previously bought a ticket.
So who creates your images for these events? Are they images of the venue, of the performers?
Usually they are images which we have had, taken by photographers and things like that, but when we create a poster for an event, it's actually us which create it. We don't tend to use AI, because I don't know if you've noticed, if you render a person with AI, they tend to get 6 fingers. So we tend to avoid that. But we do use a software called Canva, which is actually really, really great. And it's also free as well, which is...
With a paid-for version.
Yeah, there is a paid-for version. We do actually use the paid version, but the free version is good for a lot of people kind of starting out, because it allows you to create kind of professional looking posters without having to up the fees and things in regards to venues and things like that, because venues do charge quite a bit to make posters and push it. They usually leave you down to do your own advertising.
So that's very interesting. I'm sure our viewers will be happy to hear more about that when we have more time. So what are you looking for when you're hiring a venue?
Oh gosh, each venue have their own engineer as well in-house, so that's one thing which I actually look out for, but not in the way that you'd think. I look for venues which don't have an engineer, because I have an engineer as part of the Stroud Drag Collective.
So, to clarify for our listeners, the main engineering roles needed in running live events are the front of house engineer, which is the person that runs the mixing desk, the lighting engineer, who hopefully doesn't blind everyone, and the patch engineer, who plugs the equipment into the right places, because we wouldn't want them plugged into the wrong places. But to save money, smaller venues can use one engineer for all of these roles. Performers also sometimes employ their own engineers.
Yes, that is completely right. That's only one thing. Lots of things, to be fair, I look out for, such as target audience being one. If I was planning on doing a Pride event, for example, I wouldn't go off and be looking at, like a church, for example.
Yeah, I don't think that would go very well.
No, I don't think it would either. I think it would make a great venue, but I don't think it would kind of get past it, to be fair. But also, stage, parking, ticket prices, all these things. But probably the biggest thing which people often don't realise to look for is the location of it. You basically want to find somewhere which has kind of good bus travel, especially if you're serving alcohol at an event. People often will look for a way to get home because obviously they can't drive after an event. You want to be looking for somewhere which good bus travel, good train, but also how you're going to get the equipment in. I cannot tell you the amount of times I've looked at a venue and been like, right, so we need to get all this sound equipment in, but it's up 4 flights of stairs. And all of a sudden I'm like, no, I don't really want to do that venue, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I don't blame you. That'll take a lot of people to get all of that equipment up the stairs.
Exactly. I don't know about you, but I was still like a working back at the age of 40. So all these things are things which I actually look for. But I'd be interested to know though, really, because I'm not sure if you've looked at venues before, but what sort of things would you think that you need to look for in a venue?
I'd look for also the size of the venue, how many people you could fit in, because then you definitely need to plan with that, with tickets, the volume levels and everything that you need to counter for. And even if with your mixing engineers, then you need them to be able to think for the size of the venue, the frequency response of the venue, because you need to mix to that particular venue.
Yes, and a lot of people don't actually know that. So the amount of times where we've had performers send in their staff and then at the very last minute, and it's taken the sound engineer a hot minute to kind of remix it for that venue because acoustics play differently in lots of different venues. It's very difficult. And also the other thing which people need to kind of recognise when you're looking at a venue is the people on the stage performing need to be able to hear the music as well, which, a lot of people face the speakers away, and then when you're on the stage, you're like, I think I'm in time, and I think I'm doing the correct thing, but you don't actually know.
The sound on the stage is very different to the sound from an engineer's perspective.
Completely, yes. And obviously a good engineer will take that into account. Yeah, that's basically the things which I would look for in a venue, and obviously you need to make the event viable.
So let's elaborate on that. What do you think about the high volume levels and harsh lighting at these events?
Well, that is, gosh, I can't tell you how many events I've been to, Lily, where they have been far too high, or I feel like I've been blinded. Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've attended some events where the sound and lighting has been great, but there's been other times where sometimes the bass has been far too high and I can't hear the singers. There's been times where, like I said earlier, I've been on a stage and I can't hear anything which is going on because the speakers aren't facing me. There's been other times where the microphone they've had on the stage just is not set well enough so that the singers, like the vocals of the singers isn't coming through on the music. Their backing track is too high. And that's just in regards to sound. There is so many things to go up on about in regards to sound.
Because for those sound engineers out there, you really need to think about your monitor setup and what you're sending to each individual performer, because I've had moments on stage where I was playing the piano and I could not hear what I was playing.
Yes, exactly. I think it's good practice, I think, to make sure people know, or at least do a sound check, far before, because personally, I don't do an event without a sound check because that's something that needs to happen. Like I said, and that's just talking about sound. I mean, lights as well, as you mentioned earlier, they're a whole other ball game as well. I must admit, I am a fan of kind of like, when I say flashy lights, I don't mean like the ones that flash because they cause seizures and things. Whole nother problem there.
And migraines.
Yeah, exactly. Whole nother problem there. But, I do like lighting because I think it can add to a show. But I think where a lot of people kind of fail in regards to lighting is I don't think lighting should be kind of shone at either audience members or performers. And I don't know if you know, I'm pretty sure you do, about like the 45-degree rule and things like that, where, light should be at a certain angle so that it doesn't blind the performers on stage.
That is actually a rule that I've not come across before.
Is it not? Okay, it's interesting, yeah. They say that light should be positioned in a way so that it doesn't blind people on the stage. And like I said, if you're an audience as well, you don't want these lights buzzing around and spinning and then blinding your audience, because
it can also cause sensory overload.
Yes, exactly. And nobody wants to be sat there and being like, great, I'm now losing my hearing and I'm going blind. So, so you people come to an event, to basically enjoy themselves.
They don't want to leave with ringing ears at the end of the night.
Exactly. They don't want to leave, we put on a waiting list on the NHS. So basically, you have
we
to...
know how long those are.
Exactly. They go to an event and they're on a waiting list for 2 years, Gosh, that's not what you want.
Especially with the human hearing range, we're supposed to be able to hear from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz.
Yeah.
But actually, what we can hear, by the time we're older, you can lose some of those frequencies off your hearing because of going to events like these.
You can, yes, and I think that's why some events I've been to, not ones which I've done, but like big, large-scale events, sometimes they do offer kind of like earbuds and things like that, and they do actually now recommend that you wear earbuds to things like big arena events where the sound is like ridiculously loud, which I can understand in those kind of venues where the sound is very loud, because it's got to travel a large distance and can't have speakers everywhere.
You can't only use one microphone for an entire band in a venue like that.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, if you've got a band and you have one microphone, I mean, you don't have a band really, do you? You have one person singing into a microphone, use the microphone, and then the rest is just background noise.
Yeah.
So you do need a large kind of setup in regards to it, and that takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of setup. And also takes lots of money as well, because as we know, microphones and things are not cheap.
Yeah, the cheapest industry standard microphones are about 90, over £100.
Exactly. And gosh, I cannot tell you the amount of money I've spent on microphones, and even worse, the microphone leads. But that is something that bands have to take into consideration. And also, if you're an event organizer as well, that is also something which you need to also let bands know about. Because if you, as an event organizer, have your own equipment, you need to pass on those specifics. But sometimes bands like to use their own. But as an event organizer, when they bring in their own stuff, it makes it very difficult. Basically, it's because you don't know how they work. And often I've had a performer come up and be like, right, I'm bringing my own microphone, and it's about a £15 one off of Amazon that has no weight to it, and then all of a sudden it picks up everything around it, and you're like, great.
That's why your sound engineer has to pay really careful consideration to that microphone.
Exactly. And honestly, sound engineers, I mean, they work miracles sometimes, but there's only so many miracles they can work when you've got a cheap microphone for one band. There's only so much they can do.
So let's elaborate to our listeners, because I'm sure they'd like to know the price of some of these microphones.
Oh gosh, people often think that that equipment sometimes is cheap, because you can get very cheap equipment, in the range of like £15 for a microphone is kind of, I mentioned earlier, sort of thing. But they can go up to massive amounts, and I'm talking like tens of thousands.
I mean, I've seen microphones, not microphones that you would use in a live context, but like binaural microphones that cost 15,000.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people don't think of all these little things which come in, and that's just microphones. I mean, if you're going more into like the more tech stuff, so like light speakers and things like that, I mean, speakers, wow, they range hugely, like even more so than microphones. Like I've seen some speakers, people can get like little Bluetooth speakers and things like that, but
they're good for home use, but they wouldn't be good for anything live.
Oh gosh, can you imagine if you turn up to an event and they're like, here we go, we've got all our Bluetooth speakers. Oh my gosh.
I'm not sure how a mixing engineer would mix with Bluetooth speakers.
You know what? I feel that just for an April Fool's prank, I might just do that. But in all seriousness, speakers themselves, I mean, you are looking for thousands of pounds just for one singular speaker.
Especially bass speakers, because the more bassy they are, the bigger they are, because of the sound waves they need to produce.
Yes, exactly. And also, speakers have different wattages and things like that as well. And, that leads into, not actually overloading the amp as well, which runs everything.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you think microphones and speakers are expensive. Oof, you're not even getting into amps, my gosh.
Yeah, you need all of this to power these things.
Exactly, and an amp obviously has all the connectors going into it and things like that. And honestly, amps, like, I've actually had one blow, and I was like in the middle of an event, and I was like, oh my gosh, what even do I do? Because the event can't even like go on without an amp.
I mean, that is something I've not experienced. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so when I basically was performing, speakers sound great, but if you're performing, you can always tell when a speaker goes, and you're like, oh no. When an amp goes, oof, everything just fails to basically work, and then you start to worry because amps pretty much go up to like tens of thousands. You
It's an
can get
expensive item to have to replace.
Yes, exactly. They are the one thing you do not want to break. And then, when they do break, you cry a little because, your bank balance is going to take a hit. But like I said, speakers, the thing you have to be very careful with in regards to amps and speakers is, amps have they can handle a lot of wattage. But if you've got some really, really powerful speakers going through an amp which can't handle that amount of wattage, that's it, your amp's pretty much on borrowed time. And also speakers can produce a lot of bass and things like that as well. And often an amp, obviously clues in the name, amplifies. If you've got a bassy speaker and you run it through an amp, all of a sudden it's producing even more bass, and
the vibrations that audience would feel.
Exactly. If it's causing a lot of vibrations and things, microphones pick up on noise, and when things vibrate,
you'd get feedback.
Exactly. So, like I said, that's the one thing you don't want.
So, if anyone has never experienced the pain of feedback, that is when the microphone and the amp, if they're facing each other, and the sound going into the microphone, and then it's coming out of the amp and back into the microphone, you get this awful ringing noise that just envelops the entire room.
Yep, you do. But I must admit, this one time, Lily, I may have used that as a way to make sure everyone got quiet. So, because nobody was listening, and so I literally just got the microphone, put it near a speaker, made a loud noise, and all of a sudden everyone went quiet. It is a great way to get them under control, but I really wouldn't recommend it because, people then put their hands over the room and they're like, ow. But, like I said, that point, to be fair, they kind of deserved it at that point. But, and also, if they were wearing earbuds and things, they actually wouldn't have that problem. They would have been able to handle that feedback.
So there's different types of earbuds, like for blocking out sound, and you even have in-ear monitors or stage monitors, depending on what the performer and the venue prefers. So out of all of these options, what do you use?
So, I mean, as an audience member, if you're wanting to wear kind of like earbuds and things like that to kind of a show, then I would definitely recommend either noise cancelling ones, or ones where you can switch the setting of them. So, for example, in like my day-to-day life where I listen to music, I use, and you can switch between noise cancelling and also, a setting which allows like music and things to come through. The noise cancelling stops it just enough, but if you're on stage, I mean, you usually have like an earpiece, or I have like an earpiece in my ear. So if I'm, for example, talking on a microphone, somebody is usually talking in my ear.
So then that gives you, I'm assuming, direct communication with the front of house engineer?
It does, yes. And usually the front of house engineer is like, quick, stall them, something's gone wrong, or, the next track isn't playing, or, a wire's gone. So, I usually have somebody talking in my ear, and then if you're talking to people while somebody's talking in your ear, it's very difficult to kind of actually, focus on talking to people.
That would be a benefit of having in-ear monitors, because if you have on-stage monitors, you would not be able to have the front of house engineer talking to you, because the audience would also hear it.
Yes, exactly. And I find that while kind of like on-stage monitors are still being used, it's less so now in venues, because, we've all seen, like, if you're seeing a concert or somebody performing, they always have an ear monitor in. It kind of becomes a bit like the industry standard now. So they are a lot better. You've just got to make sure they don't fall out, because nobody wants to see like an earbud falling out because
That'd be very distracting for the performer.
It would, yes. And also, if you're watching, you do see something like dangling, swinging around if there's somebody on stage, which is quite amusing, obviously, when you're an audience member. But if you're paying a ticket price, you kind of, you want to see a professional kind of show.
So you mentioned previously about ticket prices when looking at these venues. So what goes into making these ticket prices, and where do you even buy the tickets from?
So, I mean, a lot of people think that when they're buying a ticket, that money is going straight into, the artist, the person performing, whoever it may be. But that couldn't actually be further from the truth. a ticket price has to cover, the cost of the equipment. And as, we've already stated, like microphones, amps, speakers, they all range from, hundreds to thousands of pounds. So, that basically helps cover part of the cost in regards to this equipment. Ultimately, when you're starting out and if you're wanting to buy this equipment, you will be working at a loss because there is no event you're going to do where you're going to pull in £100,000, which will cover the cost of the equipment. The ticket price also covers the venue hire, also the acts, because acts have to be paid some money as well. Also the person organising the event would take some sort of money based, depending on what their setup is. Sometimes the sound engineer will also take a little bit extra as well, depending on how they've agreed to be paid. And also, all these people which are performing, they need to obviously pay their bills the same as everyone else. So, you can't just be like, oh, here's £25 for performing, because they're not going to do anything with that, because that's not going to help them, pay their rent and things like that. So often ticket prices are a lot higher than people think, because all these things, are expensive to run. And also that doesn't even take into account insurances, if you're part of like a management label or things like that, you have to pay them and things like that.
And other licenses, which
Exactly.
we can get into more later.
Yes, exactly. There is a lot which goes into an event. The ticket price actually helps cover that, but quite often than not, if you put your ticket price too high, people don't want to buy a ticket price, but if you put it too low, you're not earning enough money. But to kind of go back to your question a little bit earlier in regards to obviously saying where can you buy tickets from, there's loads and loads of avenues where you can buy tickets from. Some venues, so for example, venues in Gloucester will have a box office, which they want to manage all ticket sales through them because they want to know numbers and things like that. Other venues, you can sell them however you want. Some people sell them via Facebook, but I would be very cautious of that. Other places.
Yeah, you never know when you're going to get scammed.
Exactly. But there's some like ticketing websites which are very kind of helpful. One, like for example, Ticket Source, which can be used to sell tickets. But all of these kind of ticketing websites come with a fee. That also goes into the ticket prices, which is ironic really, considering using a ticket website so people can buy tickets, you need to pay a ticket website with your tickets. But, so all these things kind of affect the ticket price. Yeah, you can buy these tickets from kind of anywhere. And also, if you're ever unsure about how to actually purchase a ticket, I definitely would say to reach out to the event organizer or performer, because they will usually have the direct information.
So, how, as a person setting up this event, how do you sell your tickets?
So, when I want to sell my tickets, which is becoming increasingly difficult because of COVID, people are now spending, they rock up on the door and like, can I buy a ticket? Which, if you're running an event, that's the last thing you want, because you can't judge numbers. Equally, you can't say no to them. When I'm selling tickets, I use Ticket Source, for one, but also use, posters. We can sell tickets kind of in-house. So if anybody approached me, for example, in the street and whatnot, and said, can I buy a ticket? Because I've got all the details to log into Ticket Source and things like that, I can issue a ticket there and then. How I would sell tickets is, if they're listening, I'm going to try and sell them the ticket. Whether that be on social media or whether that be in person. You have to keep the dialogue open between you and your customers, because you basically want customers to feel important. So they buy tickets for future events and things like that. You want to build up a customer base.
Thank you, Neon, for joining me.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to take a little break now, and we'll see you for part 2.